All right. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with amazing Melissa. Hey, Melissa. Thank you for joining.
Hi, thanks, Yawash. It's great to be with you again.
Yeah. All right. So, let's dive into it straight away. Such a pleasure to have you here because, you've been for me, we had a conversation around a year ago and, just learning from you in person when you were a guest speaker at the ACS, Steve Chandler School, learning from you from your book. Yeah, it's had such an impact on me, on my personal journey, as a coach, growing my own practice, but also really impactful for the coaches that I've worked with, and like I said before we start recording, this book, is mandatory to read for anyone that wants to work with me. And, I don't really recommend books lightly. I love reading books,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of books that are valuable, but this specifically is very useful. And I love that first page where you start the book. You mentioned something, you say, I wish there was a book when I started, right? That talk about the nitty gritty, right? And I love that. So, yeah, and by the way, for those of that don't know the book, make sure you get a copy of the book. It's called Living Service, The Journey of a Prosperous Coach. And yeah, maybe we'll put a link somewhere underneath so people can grab that. Yeah, let's start. So tell me a little bit, like often we start with like tell me about your journey, but I think what would be interesting is to, for those that don't know you, tell us a little bit about where you are right now. Because often we start all the way back, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think what would be interesting to is if you can tell us a little bit about where you are right now, and then we'll take people back to how you got here.
Okay, great. So one thing I want to say too about the book is that it's going to be coming out in an audio format. So that's going to be
Awesome.
happening end of December, beginning of January. So that's super exciting. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be reading it. Wish me luck.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome. I
yeah,
I love listening to books again and again when I'm running. So that's going to be very useful. Thank you.
good. So where I'm at, I am about 11 years into my journey of having turned pro as a coach. So in 2009, I made this decision that I was going to turn pro, be a professional coach, be somebody who was out in the world and serving people and helping people, making money and doing it full time and being paid well for what I was doing. Um, so now it's 11 years into it, and I'm at a place where I continue to grow. I continue to be coached full time. I work with different coaches now. For the first 10 years, I worked with Steve Chandler. I also got to work with Ron Wilder.
Mhm.
Um, but I still know what's required to thrive as a professional coach. It's being coached, it's continuing to look at myself and uh, have my life get better and my relationships improve. And it's about continuing to review and refine my enrollment with clients and to look at where can I up level, where can I elevate my service and bring more of that so that I'm stronger as a coach, I have greater impact, I have more empathy, more compassion, better connection, so I can help people change. So that's where I'm at. And um, I just feel really grateful for this journey because I'm at a place now where there's a lot of inner peace, there's calm, there's, uh, like you said, there's the fun of experimentation. If I screw it up, okay, all right, there's something I can learn from it. It used to be devastating for me to screw something up, you know, and I'm just at this place where I'm really enjoying it, and I have learned not to take myself so seriously. And that was a big thing for me to have to figure out, for me to have to move beyond, because everything prior to this was very serious. So that's where I'm at. I've got clients I love. Half the work that I do is with coaches. The other half is with professionals, helping them have um, improved professional lives and personal lives. So
Yeah.
that's me today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's beautiful, and one of the reasons I want to highlight that is because you've been doing this 11 years. You mentioned 11 years. Well, 11 years ago you turned pro. So I see you probably have been doing it even longer, right?
Yeah. I started coaching, what we called coaching in
Mm-hmm.
1995. So I um, spent a good 12, 14 years attempting to run workshops and not filling them, trying to create clients. I didn't even call it create. I was out to get people.
Yeah.
I was out to get people. It's out to reel them in.
Mm.
And I didn't know what I was doing. So it was a game of start, stop, get frustrated, blame other people for my lack of progression, blame myself, get frustrated, go do something else. And then finally just had the moment where I thought, I've got to do this. I've got to attempt to create a coaching business or die trying. I know it sounds dramatic, but that's truly where I was at. And fortunately, I remembered Steve Chandler's name and I contacted him and he responded, which I was shocked by. So
Yeah.
that's where it started.
Yeah. Well, I love to pick on that because, right, you mentioned that. Can you repeat it again? You said I'm gonna do this, or I'm gonna succeed at this, or die trying, right?
Yes.
Right. And for me, that shows commitment, right?
Yes.
Because look, sometimes people say, "Well, I'll try it." Trying it is different than, "Well, I'm gonna do this." And I love this. I read this long time ago in a book, and it said, "Look, I'm gonna climb that mountain, and you're gonna see me go up, and either you're gonna see me on top, or you're gonna see me dead next to the mountain, right?" And I love that. So that for me shows commitment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was very committed. And what I love about commitment for me, it is a quiet, decided,
Mm,
no nonsense, whatever this is going to take place. I often don't, I often don't share it with anybody. It's sacred and I hold it closely, but that's what I do. And we've all been in those places where we've made those kinds of decisions. There's nothing dramatic about those decisions. They're just, they're just good, strong decisions. And there's no going back. You don't know where you're headed. And I used to be incredibly uncomfortable with the unknown. Now it's kind of, well, this is where you're headed. And of course it's unknown because you've never been here before. And
yeah,
that's what's exciting. That's what's cool. That's what's energizing. And you get more and more comfortable with the unknown just as you realize it's actually there totally for you to create in.
yeah, mm, yeah. That's very. Thank you for sharing that. Um, you there's a few things you mentioned here, and by the way, just like for me, it's not so much about the numbers, right? But just to give people an idea, right? You mentioned you've been doing this 11 years ago. You decided to turn pro to do this full time, but you've not just only created a full time income, right? It's a very successful business, right?
Mhm.
And I love this also. Like often, people talk about, well, it's only the people that coach businesses or coach other coaches that do really well, but you're also still doing a lot of other. You're coaching a lot of clients around their different areas of life, right?
Yes, yes. Um, yeah, I had this story running for a really long time that the people who were successful, the only ones who were successful had corporate backgrounds. They themselves had long careers inside corporate. They knew heavy hitters inside corporate. or organizations. They knew people with money. They had those kinds of connections. And I didn't have that. So in my mind, I didn't really have a leg up, if you will. Now, it's not to say that people who have connections with people who have money, um, that isn't useful to them because they've got people who can afford coaching.
Yeah.
But what I noticed was that unless I really became great at enrolling, unless I learned to love creating clients, um, it didn't matter whether I knew people with a lot of money or people who didn't have a lot of money, because I had seen people who had a lot of money, who had as much resistance and excuses and reasons why coaching wasn't wasn't the right time, or they didn't have money, or whatever. I mean, the same excuses existed regardless of somebody's um, level of income, their economic status. So for me, where I saw that I needed to go was to, and I love the book, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. That book by Cal Newport. Be so good that I didn't have to be concerned about somebody's financial status, or I didn't have to be concerned that I didn't have a corporate background or that I didn't know people in corporate. There's so many people, and I could help whoever I invited into a conversation or who contacted me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to mention, because it's, while it's useful, while our network is useful, but building our skills, we can create an inner circle, right? So it's not so much about where you live or who you know, right? And I can personally relate to that as well. Yeah, thank you. Well, what you mentioned, actually a book here, right? One of the questions I was gonna ask later, because I'm always curious about books. So I know, you can find so much wisdom and so much, experience of other people in there. So you mentioned the book by Cal Newport. What are maybe like two other books that had a really impact on you growing your business as a coach?
Oh, geez. Well, recently it's been two of Cal Newport's books, Deep Work and So Good
Mhm.
They Can't Ignore You.
Yeah.
Um, I'd also say Steve Chandler's 100 Ways to Create Wealth has had a big impact. It's one of those books where I remember when I first picked it up, I thought, yeah, I know all this stuff. And anytime that comes out of my mouth, I realize I'm not paying attention. I realize I'm not open to seeing something new. I've shut down. And so I went back to that book and I've read it a number of times. In fact, it's a book that I recommend to many of my clients. There's there's gold in almost every page. There's something you'll discover. One of the things recently I read in it was this idea that if you take an hour out of your day, and it's a creative space where you allow yourself to think, you allow yourself to be, whether you go for a walk or you sit in a chair or whatever you're doing, maybe you're exercising, anything where you just allow yourself to be, that in that space, you can come up with all kinds of wealth creation ideas. And it's really true. That's another thing that's changed over the years, that I have time set aside for myself now in my calendar where I use it to imagine. I use it. I love this phrase, picked it up from George Pransky, whimsical thinking, just where I'll allow myself to imagine um, what maybe I would have never allowed myself to imagine with a client, with my business, with my personal life. So that book that book continues to make a big impact on me. And you can just pick that book up and read a chapter. There are a couple of pages like Steve's books are, but I also love it. It's he wrote it with Sam Beckford. It's just old school, but it's just like everything. The fundamentals apply.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great book. I remember when I started my practice 4 years ago, I read a page a day or a chapter a day,
Yeah.
and it's very impactful. Yeah, and I love that idea that you mentioned there, the thinking space, right? It's connected to one of the questions I had for you. In your book, you talk about how it's important that we're heart centered and we focus on the being, but we want to balance it with the doing, right? Because what I personally see is that some coaches go too much on the other side, on the left side, where they focus so much on they meditate for an hour, 2 hours, and a lot of their work and time and attention goes towards who they're being, right?
Mm.
And then sometimes we have the other group where they focus too much on the doing and they cram their day full with calls and social media posts, right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I've done both. So it's it's good to see too much of one or the other does not make for an effective, productive coaching business. So I did the doing part where I was working and working and working. I got to a place where I was probably working anywhere between 10 to 14 hours a day. And somebody might look at that and think, gosh, that's insane. But I got to tell you, I was having fun and I didn't want to stop. But there was a point where I realized that the not wanting to stop had less to do with the fun of it. That had kind of worn away. It had more to do with the trying to keep ahead, trying to prove to myself, trying to make sure the whole thing didn't fall apart. So it was really coming from a place of fear. So that's when I realized, okay, wait a second. What if I spent less time doing and I gave myself some space? And this came from a friend and a colleague of mine, Karen Davis, who's a really extraordinary coach. And she made a comment to me. She said, Melissa, if you'd slow down a bit, you'd realize that your level of service would actually go up. Now, I had worked long enough and hard enough and was tired enough to listen. I don't think I would have listened otherwise. But I looked at her and she was so composed and so relaxed. I thought, gosh, she knows something I don't know, and I need to pay attention. And so that's when I turned the dial back on the doing. So I was working maybe 10 hours a day, which was a significant drop. And I
Yeah,
had the ability to, I have adult kids. My husband has his own business. So I had sounds funny, but the luxury to indulge myself with all this time. And when I dialed it back and I started to slow down, I could see so many opportunities, CA Wash, that I was missing. Opportunities to serve an existing client in a way that was much more profound rather than just kind of skimming over. Oh, read this, or I'll send you this, or tell me what's been going on. But to have time to think about the person, where I thought, oh, this would be really helpful.
yeah,
I'm gonna send them this and tell them why, so that it wasn't just here's a link, watch this. So it's much more thoughtful, much more engaged, and everybody sensed it. So that the level of client I was creating ramped up also, meaning it was somebody who was more committed. It was somebody who had made a higher investment in themselves. It was somebody who had that deep, quiet commitment. I started to notice those people rather than just running around creating clients. So and then on the other side of it, the being part, where there's a lot of thinking and there's a lot of meditating, nothing wrong with that. But in that space, and this was earlier on for me, I noticed I held back because I was afraid. I didn't want to make mistakes. I didn't want somebody to tell me no. I didn't want to hear, oh, I'll think about it. I didn't want to see where if I spend some time, I could actually improve, because it had so much meaning about me not being able to do something, not being a good enough coach. There was so much personal meaning applied to it. So I could I could spend time just being and make up a story that whatever, I'd have to work through some things first before I took action. And what I realized was that the taking of action was the learning. So I had to develop a different relationship to learning. And thank goodness I did, because now I love learning. But before, boy, keep it away. I wasn't interested in seeing what I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you talk about this in your book as well, and I think this is such an important thing. Is, often we think like, well, I need to do healing, I need to do the inner work, and I think the inner work is an important part, right? I think it's probably like, if you think about the different pillars of business, often people just look at marketing, sales, and delivery, but I think the inner work is an important part of that. But sometimes we wait too long, right? I love what you said there. It's actually taking action, because in the action, right, in the doing, that's also where the being improves.
Yeah,
We learn, and by taking those small steps, we
yeah.
actually, you know, you mentioned you're afraid to make mistakes, right? You didn't completely get rid of that fear, right?
That's right. Um, I have to tell you, what I love about our profession is that the being and the doing, the service, the willingness to fail, which is just code for not getting what you want, and learning from that, all of it is the healing. All of it. Like, I think about myself as who I was 11 years ago. Um, Through building a coaching business, there has been so much healing. There has been so much growth, and uh, just growing up as an individual. So that's what's so great. There's this such an awesome quote. It's by, I'm trying to think of the name of the guy. I think it's James Clear, and it's something like, entrepreneurship is, I'm gonna screw it up. I'll find it at some point before we go on, but it's so good. Can you give me a second just to look for it quick?
Yeah, of
Hang
course.
on.
Yeah, that's
It's
cool.
something. Oh, I know where I can find it. Your readers or your listeners have to
No,
hear
that's
this.
cool. Look, I think while you're looking for that, right? I think something that's really useful is, you know, in your book you talk a lot about this, right? You talk about how you slowly developed a system for learning,
Yeah.
right? And I think this is so important, because often with what I see with coaches is that they see failure on one side and success on the other side. They're almost trying to get away from failure.
Mm.
And this is, by the way, like when I say most coaches, that includes me. I used to really think about like, well, hey, I need to let me try to avoid that and try to do things, as much as right as possible. But actually, I realized in your book kind of emphasized this, right? That it isn't on the other side. You're on this side here, right? Then there's failure, then there's success. We get there through that, and you also you have a different way of looking at it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Before, I would avoid it at all costs. Any potential mistake, any failure, because it meant so much about who I was, and I was trying to be competent and capable and look like I knew what was going on. But the growth has happened in having the experience where I didn't get what I wanted, where it didn't turn out the way that I wanted, and then learning from it and then moving on. And that's the reality for everybody. So the degree to which you succeed is the the degree to which you have a good relationship with failure. You have to have a good relationship with taking action, not getting it right, learning from it. And then you start to realize that this isn't personal, you're just learning. There's no meaning about you or your ability or your competency. It's a matter of, are you willing to become an exceptional learner? And exceptional learners have great relationships with failure. They really do. Um, so I wanted to pop in and just say that that quote that I was finding, I just absolutely love this. This is why it's so wonderful running our own businesses. Entrepreneurship is a personal growth engine disguised as a business pursuit. And that quote's from James Clear. He's
Yeah,
got another great book called Atomic Habits.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's beautiful. The best person growth, you get it from growing your business,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. All right, cool. So this has been very valuable so far. So let's look at um another question. So tell me, you talked about, you know, I mean, I would love to pick your brain really on you talked about like you worked 10 years with Steve, right? And then, you've been working with other coaches as well. So yeah, one of the questions I usually ask is what's been your best investment as a coach um in your journey so far?
Well, hands down, Mr. Steve Chandler.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that was the best investment because I met him at the early stages. And what I got from Steve was he role modeled who I wanted to be. So, it's funny, you think when I first started working with him, I had this idea he was going to do something to me or for me. Like, give me the 5 secrets to creating clients, and then we're done, our relationship's over, and I'm not, that's nice, and you're a nice guy. And then, of course, more time went on. I still kept working with him. But what I started to notice was that the guy, you hear this phrase all the time, walks his talk. It was more than that. I mean, he lived service in his whole life. He lives it in his whole life, his personal life and his professional life. He's honest about his own journey. Uh, the other thing I really respect about him is that he didn't stop learning. He's the consummate learner. He was always working with somebody new, open to new ideas. And he role modeled that for me and all the other coaches who worked with him. And it was inspiring to me. And then I saw, wow, people rehire and renew with coaches who continue to grow themselves. That level of commitment to their own growth and their own opening up and seeing the world with fresh eyes, those are the coaches that people gravitate towards. And I thought, I want to be like that. So just who Steve is, um, and being around it and watching him, that was the best investment. And of course, being coached and watching him coach other people, but really who he is.
Yeah, thank you. And I love that. If for those that are listening or watching that missed that, people that renew and rehire coaches are coaches that are committed to learning, right? I think it's so important that, and I love that because I used to really think I've worked with coaches before, and again, there's no judgment here, but I've worked with coaches who said like after 3 months, and I actually thought like, hey, I want to renew, but he was like after 3 months, he was like, look, we're done. I've done my job, and he would always work with people kind of like at the start of their, let's say, entrepreneurship journey, right? And one of the things that I've seen is that with coaches like Steve, coaches like yourself, people will continue hiring you because you keep growing,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, we as coaches, we can't ask people to do what we've not been willing to do. We can't ask people to go to places we haven't been willing to go to, places such as, where it looks scary, or I don't want to have that conversation, or what if I really say the truth to this person, or how can I ask that fee? What so we've got to go there, and we go there and we see um, the growth, the treasures, the aliveness, the freedom, and then we can just be there. And this is the thing I love about coaching. We can be there and hang in there with someone. That's our job. Our job is to hang in there with somebody. Somebody is having a hard time, or somebody's not getting it, or somebody's scared. It's like we hang in there, we keep hanging in there, and then boom, they make a breakthrough. Their consciousness rises. They have a change. Life is different for them. And so if we do that for ourselves and we hire people to help us, we can do the same with clients.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, um, look, one of the, I think we talked a little bit about this before we start the recording, right? One of the things is like sometimes coaches are listening to this, and these are coaches sometimes that have been in business for years, and some of them, like have had a little bit of success, but are struggling, right? They look at someone like yourself, or they look at someone like Steve or Rich, and say, well, they've always had a coach, or they've had it easy. Now you shared your story. You've been doing this 11 years as a professional. You've done it 12 to 14 years before that, right? So if someone is listening to this and they're struggling currently as a coach, what would you say to them? Maybe like not just, I mean, for you, it's not so much a theory. You've gone through that journey yourself, right? What's
Yeah.
been really fundamental for you to kind of go from a struggling coach to a coach that started doing really well?
Well, the very first thing was I had to get over myself and ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Because for the longest time, it's like, this can't be this hard. I can figure this out. And then there was the pride factor. Ask for help. I don't want to ask for help. And I remember my husband, who's an entrepreneur, would say, you could figure this out yourself. And I got to tell you, I could not. I did not know what service was. I did not know this idea of helping somebody before they paid you sounded ridiculous to me. It's just, I didn't get it. But the first thing was I had to get over myself and finally ask for help. And I just was super stubborn and I wasn't going to do it. So I asked for help. I also had to stop blaming people for the lack of my progress. There's some people who point the finger at themselves and they blame themselves, and that's where they start. Of course, both is going on, right? Because we can't just judge ourselves. It's going to apply to other people. But I was
Yeah.
really into blaming other people for my lack of progress, blaming my husband, blaming my business, my hobby partner. I call her my hobby partner. But really, the truth was, I was just very afraid. But I didn't admit it. So if somebody's been struggling, look at yourself, be kind with yourself, but just own it. If you've been struggling and you're blaming other people, get real with yourself, stop it, and go ask for some help. And I know it hurts, your ego's going to take a hit, but it's a lot better to get past that and start getting some assistance. So it's getting assistance. The other part was you got to hang in there with yourself. And if you get a coach and you start blaming that coach, realize you're just repeating a pattern, stop it. And start being an owner and being responsible, but not beating yourself up, just being open and doing those things that you were afraid to do. Go do those things. I don't know if I ever told you. Did I ever tell you about the scary jar?
Scary jar. I'm not sure. Don't think so.
So good. It's the one chapter I was told to take out of the book. And I always would listen to myself. No, that chapter's staying in, this one's coming out. I took it out. If I was going to rewrite Living Service, the scary jar would be in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what it was at the time I had two coaches at once, CA Wash. So I would never recommend that to anybody. I mean, two coaches. So I was working with Ron Wilder and Steve, and there was a 6-month overlap. And I was too afraid to tell Steve. He now knows that I was worried, So I had this crazy like mentor mania going on. One person who had a completely different idea of service, and then the other person, and it was just insane. And
Yeah.
I had done that because I had this thing like, oh, I've got to make up for lost time. So anyway, what happened was when I was working with Ron, he told me that the subconscious mind has all of these beliefs, and it's based on, what we think of ourselves, and religion and sex and gender, and, basic fundamental beliefs. And then at
Okay.
some point, the conscious mind starts to develop, like around age 7. This was the theory. And he said, so what happens is the conscious self, its job is to evaluate incoming information that comes in through our 5 senses. But it's evaluating and it's making decisions based on this programming that runs in the background, which is your subconscious mind. And he said, the thing is that the subconscious mind, its job isn't to evaluate information and arrive at decisions. Its job is to simply keep you safe, and not safe in terms of don't run in the street or don't run with a sharp object, not safe like that, but love, security, and self-esteem. So that anytime you go to do something and you start to feel anxious or nervous or whatever, your subconscious mind, it's doing its job and it's going to keep you safe, and you're going to talk yourself out of it. But if you go do this thing, whatever it is, on the other side is this freedom and aliveness. Ron was telling me this. And he said to me, Melissa, here's the thing. Take the action, whatever it is, not to get the result you want, not to prove anything to yourself, but to simply prove to your subconscious mind you're not going to die. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, like you literally are drawing breath. You send that email and like you're still alive. And I thought, that makes a lot of sense, because it literally feels like life and death. Am I going to say yes to speaking in front of that group? Am I going to send this email? Am I going to resend this email? Am I going to invite this person that I think is like a pedestal person into a coaching conversation? So what I did was I got a large water pitcher, and then I took 8.5 by 11 paper and I cut it into strips. And then I got these markers, these colored markers. And I decided I was going to play the scary jar game. And what it was that every time I passed the scary jar, I had to think of something that I was freaking myself out about, and then go do the thing. And on a piece of paper, write the date, and then write one line about what it was that I did and put it into the jar. And I was winning if I was still drawing breath, like I was alive. And I did this for 2.5 years.
Wow.
Wow is right. And I did it because I I had I just needed to move beyond this fear that kept me so contracted.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, it got me into mad action, and it was the smartest thing I ever did. And that's when I learned how to get comfortable being uncomfortable, or to, fall in love with discomfort, because after a while it was nothing. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
share that, because we all can get creative ideas about how to move ourselves when we're feeling discomfort,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's just thinking.
Well, I think you know, that's really insightful, because sometimes we listen to, interviews like this, conversations like this, or we read books that are really useful. But then, between that know-how, right, and the doing part is that fear, right?
Yeah.
And I love this, right? And we can just, you mentioned you did it 2.5 years. I'm sure there were some of them, they were just small steps into,
Hmm.
doing the thing that you fear, right? So
Very,
this is brilliant, because often it's that comes in the way. Is that
yeah,
fear that comes in the way? Like, what will the person think of me? What if they say no? Right? There's all these thoughts around fear. Yeah, I
that's
love that.
That's
Mm.
it. Yeah, look, I had been coached, and well, what if somebody didn't respond to my email? Well, you could forward that email again and just inquire, did you get this? Right?
Yeah.
Or invite this person into a conversation. And I knew the things to do, but I was just afraid to do it for the very reasons that you just said. What are they going to think? Or, maybe they're going to say no. But if the game was just to still be alive, I could do
Mm.
that. So I was
Yeah.
like a big winner for 2.5 years. And then the fun part was I brought it into my personal life as well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's very useful. And I think, so yeah, so to make it really simple, right? Just grab a jar and you can put little ideas that feels a bit scary, feels out of the comfort zone, and then just do it. And I love that, actually, that piece about that your coach said about, don't be attached, don't do it for the result, but just to prove that you're still there, right?
That's
So
it.
you might send that email and you might not get a response, right? You
Mhm.
might invite someone and the person might say yes, but maybe you get a no.
That's
Yeah.
it. That's it. And what was really
Mm.
great about it is I'd think about the idea, like, what is this thing? Okay, you're going to send this email to this person.
Yeah.
I would send the email. I'd turn back to the little slip of paper, put the date, sent the email to X, whoever the individual was, and then, fold it in half or quarters, put it in the jar. And then I would check in. I'm like, oh, I'm alive. It sounds silly, but it got me in action. And then it was exciting. I'm like, well, if I did that, then I can go do this. And I would go do it. And then I'd write it down, I put it in the jar. And then this was really fun. At the end of 6 months, every 6 months, I'd sit down with this Ziploc bag, this gallon bag that I'd put the pieces of paper in. And I would look and I would see, oh, that still seems scary. That's amazing you did it. Or I'd look at other things that I did and I kind of laugh. I'm like, well, that's nothing. I had moved
Mm.
past it because it's all
Yeah.
thinking. It's not really the thing. It's just all this thinking that's going on that's keeping me stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important to find that balance, right, between the being and the doing, because we see, we see so many coaches that got that figured out, right? That, some call it the soul line, right? That living life, but then, it's just about also taking practical steps, and that's what I personally really love about attending Steve's school. It's very practical, right?
Yeah,
And it talks about that. What can you do next? Who's the next person you can serve?
that's
Mm,
it. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and I think that would be great. Maybe you can include it in the audio version as a bonus chapter.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to start writing it.
Okay. Cool. Tell me, like, as you've grown this business, right? Um, you know, like one of the things that I'm really curious about, right? Because we talked a little bit about, growing the first phase, kind of overcoming that. But, as you start growing your business, right, you're getting more and more clients. What was what's been for you, like, what's been for you the difference between kind of having like a 5-figure income and maybe a 6-figure, or going way beyond that?
Mhm.
What's been the difference for you in that area?
Um, I'd say one of the big differences is that once I really became more proficient at client enrollment, creating clients, paying clients, that at some point I saw I had a business. And I saw it actually because my coach said, well, it looks like you have a business. It's like, I guess I do. Like I had never really thought of it as a business. It was more Melissa out in the world trying to find clients. Okay, so I enrolled that person. Now that person's a paying client. Now I have six. Now I'm going to keep the conversations going. But when I really recognized I had a business, so then there was another mindset to create, which was to have a business mindset, to be able to look at the work that I was doing through the lens of a business owner. And when I started doing that, things changed again. So not only was I a professional coach who had a service relationship with prospective clients and clients, now I was a business owner who had a service relationship with this entity, which is called my company is called Empowered Coaching Solutions. So I had
Yeah.
that relationship there. And then I started to say, okay, well, what kind of questions am I going to ask myself now that I'm a business owner? And what do I need in place? And so I started looking at the systems that I had in place, and I started realizing, oh, I want to stay conscious to my sales system. I want to continue to look at what works and what doesn't work. I have a way of tracking clients. Um, I don't have a CRM software, but I have my own way of doing it. So I
Yeah.
started asking myself, well, what does my business need? So if I serve my business, then it's going to serve me. And one of the best questions that I was ever given was, if I were running my business 5% more like a business, what would I do? So that business mindset squeezed even more of the personal out of the experience. So the first level of pulling personal out, where I would make things up and it would mean something about me, and I was always focused on myself, was learning how to be a professional coach, which was to get the focus off of me and get it on to a client or a prospective client, like lose sight of myself. The second level was another way to take the personal out and make it more impersonal, take the dysfunction out of the business and make it more functional. And it was just being a business person and doing those things that my business needed me to do. How I handled my money, how I paid taxes, how I set money aside for my retirement, how did I make decisions about what expenses I would or would not incur. So things like
Yeah.
that. But it really, and I got to tell you too, CA Wash, was that it injected the game of business into the experience. I didn't think it would do that. I thought somehow I'd get more serious. Yeah, I was responsible and I did the things that I needed to do, but there was more of a lightness and a game to it because, again, it was more impersonal. So I tried different things that I maybe wouldn't have tried before. Create a group. Like I just recently on the fly created a group, thought I want 3 people in this group, and I enrolled those 3 people in 10 days. But it was just this idea on the fly. My business could use this and it would be fun for me.
Yeah.
So it becomes, there's less seriousness to it. And that sounds kind of funny because people think business is serious. Business isn't. It's how imaginative can you be?
Mm. Yeah, very useful. So what I'm hearing is, right, by learning more about business, you brought more awareness to those areas, right? You talked about, a sales a system around sales. You start tracking it. So you're not just saying, well, hey, I'm just showing up for the sake of service. Let me, serve people and then enroll them. But you got an idea of like, hey, how much money is coming in today or next month? You get to see, right? You raise your awareness around that. So you start making better choices in those areas.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it. Because when you look through the lens of a business owner, then the end game is to create revenue. That's the end game. Now, how do
Mm.
I do that? I do it through service. That's how I do it. But that's the end game. I'm not just randomly serving out of the
Yeah.
kindness of my heart because I love people, and I want the world to be a better place. Yes, yes to all that. But I'm running a business, and the business needs revenue to continue to come in so that I can keep doing the work that I'm doing. I can pay myself. I can pay the people that I've hired. I can um, donate money. I can do whatever I want to do. I can pay my personal bills.
Yeah.
So
You mentioned the word game a few times, right? And I'm a big lover of games, and there's always like different people, different types of people that play games, right? You have people that just play for the fun of it,
mhm.
but if people like I always play for winning. I always want to win the game, and I'm not always as clear, like I don't necessarily communicate that, but for me, there's always an intention, right? And what I'm hearing here from you, this conversation is, you're very intentional about, well, like, hey, yes, I'm playing this as a game. I want to help people make a difference,
Yep,
but we have to remember that the goal is the revenue. We have to bring in, money so we can keep running this game, right? So we can continue running this business, right? Otherwise, we are out of business.
that's right. That's it.
Yeah,
And, a lot of people might hear this and think, gosh, this is a selfish, uncaring, um, cold hearted person. Actually, it's the opposite. Because if I can, if as I take care of myself and I can pay my bills and I can live my life, I'm in a much better place to serve other people. And
yeah,
I have to be a part of the service equation. And I know for myself, you asked this question right in the beginning, what was your best investment over these 11 years? It was an investment. And that
yeah.
investment, that financial investment, every time I would pay to work with Steve or another coach, that solidified my commitment.
Mm,
And talk about all in, talk about I am going to leverage everything I can from this relationship so that I um, I can benefit, and then I benefit, then my clients benefit. My life gets better. Now, to me, that
mm.
sounds like a wonderful game.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned this in the book as well, right? The surface equation, right? We have to be part of it. The price is part of it, right? Because otherwise that circle will stop sooner or later, right? Because I see this a lot, especially with coaches. I work with a lot of spiritual coaches, right? And often this, that's one of the things I hear is, well, you know what, I really want to make a difference. What if they can't afford it, right? What I'm hearing here is, and I really recommend people to read the book because you go deeper into it, that we are part of the equation. If we don't charge, number one, maybe there's less commitment, but then also sooner or later that service will stop.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, I absolutely believe the highest form of service is a paid coaching relationship. You and I have spoken about this before, and it's the truth because otherwise it's just some nice advice that a friendly, loving person provides somebody else, and that doesn't usually go very far. There's not, there isn't that commitment. It's just, oh, that's a good idea, right? When if I share something with someone. But the idea of the service equation and we have to be a part of it, it's very true. So we're a part of it because we're financially compensated. We're a part of it because we're offering a particular coaching package that is inspiring to us, that serves the client. We're part of the service equation because we ask ourselves, would this be fun for me to work with this person? And as far as people who don't have money for coaching, there are people that I donate coaching to, um, who couldn't afford it otherwise.
Yeah.
So because I run my own business, I can create policies where I'll say I take on 3 nonprofits a year. I might donate services to the executive directors, or somebody that I care very much about who's having a hard time. I can adjust my fee. That's my call. I
Yeah,
can
exactly.
say, yeah, I can say, hey, normally when somebody works with me, it's X, but I have a special package for you, and this is what it is, and it's Y. Do you want to do that? And I get to make that call because I'm treating my business like a business.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, but you're doing it, you're looking after yourself first, right? And I think that's the important part is we can give after, if we don't have anything, there's nothing to give, right? It will be hard to continue giving if we don't make sure our cup is full. And I
Mhm.
love that. And again, like, one of the things I wanna, yeah, one of the things I wanna bring to the end of this conversation is this, that I think is beautiful, right? And people will be listening to this through a different lens, but especially the fact that you started helping coaches, right? Because this is such an honorable profession. In the last month, I think I've spoken to two GPs, a psychiatrist that are now looking into becoming a professional coach, and actually, you know, some of them doing this part-time, but some of them actually wanting to do this full-time, right? So tell me a little bit about that, because not everyone, you can see this in sports. Not everyone that's a great football player becomes a great football coach, right? What drove you to do this? And maybe you can also tell us a little bit about the group that you run for coaches.
Sure. So what got me into coaching in the first place?
No, not so much what got you into coaching, but what got you to, to create a group for coaches.
Oh, yeah. Um, so the reason I decided that part of the work that I wanted to do was to coach coaches was because I struggled so much with
Hmm.
creating a prosperous coaching business that I thought, okay, I don't want people who really want to be coaches to struggle with it and give up. Like I've met a lot of coaches, I'm sure you too have, CA Wash, where they're really great coaches and they eventually just give up.
Yeah,
And I didn't want that because I know the the growth, the self-realization, the fun, the freedom that comes with moving past all this stuff that we think is real that's just limiting us. And so that's why I help coaches. And I really like working with coaches where they're at that stage where, back to this phrase, they really need to hang in there with themselves. So that's my favorite part. Like some coaches love coaching new coaches, some coaches love coaching really advanced coaches. Um, and and both of those can be fun depending upon the level of energy that somebody brings and their
yeah,
honesty and openness and willingness, right? But that part where the 2 to 5 years where people have to hang in there and it can be tough and they can think, why am I doing this? And I made less money this month than I did 4 months ago. And those those are the people that I want to say, okay, you just need to settle down, you need to sit back, and you need to keep practicing and keep practicing. So that's why I coach coaches. That's for that part, the part where it's easy to just throw the towel in and go, I'm done. I already spent this amount of money. I'm not making the money. My business partner or my spouse or whatever, my family's wondering what's wrong with me. I love those people. So I've got a number of groups for coaches, but the group that really looks at running your business like a business is called Intentional Prosperity for Coaches,
yeah,
IPC. And it's small. I like keeping it small. Currently there's 9 coaches in it. We go up to as many as 12, but it's very robust. It's got game film coaching in it where we review client enrollment calls. They get one-on-one coaching with me. There's content calls. There are guest speakers. And it's a real immersion. So we're together for 6 months. And I always say to people, get who you are right now, because you're not going to recognize that person in 6 months. You're going to be very different. We create intentions for the group.
Yeah.
We create policies and practices, and we have sales systems. We do all kinds of things. And these are people who are really committed, and they're willing to go through this phase of it. This is the phase that's not sexy. It's not, but these people support one another too. So it's just such a great group. And I've got other groups too I love, but I respect people who will do this work, this part of the work.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And you can see your energy, the passion that's in there. And I love that, you know, that phase is often the hardest part, where, you've created, I mean, I created some amazing results in my first year. I had no idea how I did that. My second year was again about experimenting and reinventing. And, slowly I start figuring out, well, these are the fundamentals. This is what I need to stick to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And I love your bold promise that you won't recognize yourself after the 6 months. And, and I can say from my own personal experience that the fastest way we can grow as a coach is by hiring a coach that's been through that journey and being that apprentice, where you learn from being coached, from, that mentorship and that game film.
Yeah. It's very true. And the other really wonderful thing from working with a coach is you learn how to coach. The other thing is, and it took me a while, you learn to be coachable. Because being coachable is not having all the answers, willing to get it wrong, willing to be open, willing to hear a story that you think you already know, you already understand everything, but backing off, just like I said with the book, 100 Ways to Create Wealth. Wait a second. I'm not seeing everything if I'm showing up thinking I know it all. I don't. So becoming coachable as a coach is really a path to prosperity. It really is.
Yeah, there's been so many gems in this, and I think I've resisted trying not to make too many notes, but this is one definitely to re-listen again and again. Thank you. What I'll do, Melissa, I'll if you can later send me a link, we'll put a link below the podcast episode so people can go to your website, if they want to get some more information about your program. And again, highly recommend reading this book. And like Melissa said, don't read it once, read it again and again. I mean, one of the things I love to do is just write. I've written all over it, folded up pages. It's very valuable, very valuable. So yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom with us, being really open and honest about, because often it's, people, often we just on social media, we just see that how someone is living that, that lifestyle where they're really successful, working with amazing clients, right? But this is like a bit of behind the scenes, right? And if people want to go even more behind the scenes, in your book, you're even more raw and you share even more. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, thanks. And I always love talking to you, and I appreciate your invitation to come on your podcast and talk to your group. You're incredibly generous in that way. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. For me, again, it's a way of giving back to the community of coaches, and also just, sharing with them, sharing with them principles that have been so useful. Look, I'm quite careful, like, who I bring on, because at the end of the day, we have so many people with different ideas about how to run a business. But, I really believe in this philosophy. I've gone away from it and come back so many times, but this is such a powerful philosophy and I believe that it doesn't really matter whether we live in a time where there's, something like a pandemic going on, whether the whole online thing stops, you can apply these principles anywhere in the world and any time, as long as they're human beings and there's that level of connection and relationship available.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, you connect with somebody, you help them, you love them, and if it makes sense, you continue to work together. That's service. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, like I said, we'll put some details about how people can find you, and yeah, maybe any final note for, do you wanna close with anything?
Gosh, I don't know. I just love your kids in the background.
Yeah,
They're
what?
adorable.
I love this mic, but it picks up almost like it picks up even things that are happening on the street outside.
Yeah,
It's like, it's really cool.
it's perfect. Yeah, just the parting word is,
Yeah,
um, you know, hang in there and
yeah,
find someone who can help you, who lives and who is who you would love to be and love to live like. Look there, and you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong.
yeah. Thank you. Beautiful way to close it. Thank you, Melissa, for your time.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, for those that are listening or watching this, share in the comments, what's been an insight for you, and also very important, what are one or two actions that you're gonna take? How are you gonna put this into practice? Because it's all about the practice, right? Thank you, Melissa, and yeah, have fun building your business. Cool.